The holographic feed flickered across the galactic council chamber, casting pale blue light over 12 ancient faces. They watched in silence as the footage played, footage that had arrived from the remote colony world of Vethros Prime just 3 cycles ago. On the screen, a group of Valorian cubs scrambled up the jagged cliff face with effortless grace. Their 6 limbs moved in perfect synchronization, claws finding holds that seemed invisible to the untrained eye. But that was not what had summoned the council into emergency session. It was the human children climbing beside them. And it was the young Valorian named Vash, perched on a ledge above, calling down instructions in broken Terran standard. Left hand higher. Feel the rock speak to you. A human girl, no older than 8 solar cycles, adjusted her grip and pulled herself up another meter. She was laughing. Counselor Thyran slammed his foreclaw against the table. This is an abomination. The Valorians were warned. All species were warned. Human young are not to be trained in the ways of other races. And yet, Counselor Memphis said softly, it appears the cubs did not receive that message. The footage continued. A human boy named Eli had reached the top, and Vash was greeting him with the traditional Valorian gesture of respect, a pressing of foreheads. The boy mimicked it perfectly. Freeze the image, Thyran commanded. The scene stopped. 12 counselors stared at the frozen moment. An alien cub and a human child, forehead to forehead, equals. This, Thyran said, his voice trembling, is precisely what the integration protocols were designed to prevent. On Vethros Prime, Kaelin wiped the sweat from her brow and watched her students descend the cliff alongside their Valorian friends. She had been the colony's only teacher for 3 years now, responsible for educating the 47 human children who called this world home. When she had first arrived, the Valorian natives had kept their distance. The galactic warnings about humans had reached even this remote world. Humans were dangerous, unpredictable, too adaptable. They learned too quickly. They bonded too easily. They changed everything they touched. But children, Kaelin had discovered, did not care about galactic warnings. Vash had been the first to approach. A curious young cub, barely adolescent by Valorian standards, with silver fur and eyes like molten copper. He had watched Kaelin's outdoor classes with obvious fascination, watching human children struggle with mathematics, laugh at silly stories, argue over games. One day, he had simply joined them. Your young are slow climbers, Vash had said to Kaelin that first afternoon, with the brutal honesty of youth. My littermates could scale the academy walls before our first molt. Kaelin had smiled. Then perhaps you could teach them. She had meant it as a gentle deflection. She had not expected Vash to take it seriously, but he had. He had organized the other cubs, created lesson plans in his own crude way, and within 2 months, human children who had never climbed anything higher than a cargo crate were scaling cliffs alongside their 6-limbed teachers. The cubs taught the children to climb. The children taught the cubs to swim. The cubs shared their hunting songs. The children shared their fairy tales. Back and forth, a cultural exchange that no protocol had authorized, and no protocol could stop. The human teacher must be removed, Thyran declared. She has allowed this contamination to occur. Removed. Counselor Sereth, the eldest among them, finally spoke. Her voice was like dry leaves. You speak as if we are discussing a malfunctioning drone. This is a sentient being, a human sentient being. Need I remind you of the Terran response to the Cathosi incident? Silence fell. None of them had forgotten. The Cathosi had attempted to remove a human diplomat. Within a decade, the Cathosi dominion no longer existed. Then what do you propose? Thyran demanded. Sereth rose slowly and walked toward the frozen hologram. She studied the image, Vash and Eli, forehead to forehead. I propose, she said, that we ask ourselves why we are afraid. The question hung in the air like poison. Why were they afraid? The official answer was simple. Humans were dangerous. They adapted too quickly, learned too efficiently, and formed bonds too readily. A human raised among Valorians would climb like a Valorian. A human raised among Kesari would fight like a Kesari. A human raised among all species. That was the fear. Not that humans would conquer the galaxy through force. They had already proven they had no interest in empire. The fear was subtler, more insidious. Humans would become everything. They would absorb every culture, every skill, every tradition. They would blend it all together into something new, something unprecedented. And their children would carry that synthesis forward, teaching the next generation, spreading across the stars like a gentle tide that reshaped everything it touched. The Council had tried to prevent it. The integration protocols kept human colonies isolated, human children educated only by human teachers, human culture carefully contained. But they had not accounted for Vash. They had not accounted for a curious cub who saw struggling human children and simply decided to help. On Vethros Prime, as the suns began to set, Kaelin gathered her students for the walk back to the colony. Vash and his littermates joined them, as they did every evening now. "Teacher Kaelin," Vash said, falling into step beside her. "Eli says that on Earth, there are mountains taller than our great spires. Is this true?" "It is," Kaelin said. "Someday, perhaps you could see them." Vash's copper eyes widened. "Would your people allow this? A Valorian on Earth?" Kaelin looked at the children walking ahead of them, human and Valorian, laughing together, teaching each other hand games and climbing grips and silly songs. "I think," she said softly, "that my people would welcome you." Counselor Sereth turned away from the frozen hologram. "The cubs are not teaching human children to climb," she said. "They are teaching them that species boundaries are meaningless. They are teaching them that anyone can learn anything from anyone. They are teaching them that the galaxy is not a collection of isolated peoples. It is a family waiting to be formed." She looked at her fellow counselors, and for the first time in centuries, there was something like fear in her ancient eyes. "That is what you should fear," she whispered. "Not human conquest, human connection. Because once their children believe that all species are kin, once they grow up with Valorians and Kessari and Thrinians as their brothers and sisters, there will be no separating them." She paused, and perhaps there should not be. The council chamber fell silent. On Vethros Prime, a human child and a Valorian cub pressed their foreheads together and laughed.